So hello everyone and welcome to our webinar on retention strategies for scaling businesses. I'm Nicola, co-founder of the CMO Circle and partner at Growth & Company, and this is one of my favorite topics. Yet it is so often an afterthought for businesses where the focus is all on acquisition. Lots of new shiny customers, and we'll ignore those that are actually making us money. Well, I'm delighted to welcome two retention experts to discuss retention strategies with me today. But before I hand over to them, please do introduce yourselves in chat. I'd love to hear how important retention is seen in your business, because it's always been a real battle to get a focus on this space for me in my previous roles. And if you're happy to share, I'd love to know one retention initiative that has worked well for you. So over to our fabulous panelists. Rosie, do you want to do a quick intro?
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Rosie. I am growth lead at Fyxer AI, which is an AI virtual assistant to help you get out of your inbox and essentially remove the burden of admin. My role specifically, I work on lots of different things. I've worked a bit on product-led sales, product-led growth. At the moment, I'm focusing on retention and how do we make sure that people who are signed up, we've paid for them, how do they stick around? So we make sure that their lifetime value is as high as possible. So we can talk a bit more about that later.
And Jon?
Hi there, everybody. I'm the marketing director of Suits.me, which is essentially a neobank. So they focus on people who struggle to access banking for various reasons. We've brought it up to 500,000 user accounts now, and my team is almost evenly split between acquisition and retention, because I believe both have very significant value and work hand in hand with each other. That is until the end of the year. What's happened very rapidly in the last 2 weeks is one of the major dating companies has grabbed me, so I'll be moving into a global role for one of those major dating apps in the beginning of the year, looking after growth, brand, and obviously retention. Retention is huge in dating apps. So that's me.
Congrats, Jon, on the new role. Great to hear more. And you're about 50-50 retention acquisition. Rosie, what are you in terms of where your team is focused?
The team, it's quite hard to count because people work across all the different targets that we have. We have lots of people who like rove around, are generalists and help a lot. So I can't say specifically, but we have a fair few people. And we've got like 40 to 50 employees, I believe, at the moment. And then a good chunk of people are working across like core product experience and like lifecycle retention. So it's a good chunk.
That makes me happy. So Rosie, sticking with you. Marketing is so often seen as as an acquisition driver. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're seeing that come through in the chat as well. Why do you think retention is such an afterthought, and how have you managed to change the narrative to focus more on existing customers?
Definitely at past businesses I've been at, I think that a lot of the time a really poor retention can be scary because it can be a signal that you either haven't quite found product market fit or you maybe have slipped from product market fit. So a lot of the times, specifically when I was freelance, and I would come in and do strategy and work out where the company needed to go, I would often do the product market fit survey, like how disappointed would you be if you could no longer use product? And that would also correlate to retention, so low retention and low satisfaction. And I think a lot of the time when I would say, hey, I think, we need to work on like core product, core value, getting people to there in order to reduce churn and improve retention, it often was not met with oh yeah, sure, let's do that. It was an existential crisis of the business potentially not going in the right direction. So definitely when I was a freelancer in previous roles, that was the case where it's a very scary thing to not have good retention because it can signal something else. But the key thing is you need to tackle that as early as possible. And, it's a risky assumption to assume that you have product market fit. It's much better to be like, okay, churn's bad. It could be poor activation, but it could also be like poor product. So we need to get to the bottom of that as soon as possible. So I think it's an afterthought because it's scary, but also because it's a lagging indicator and it's quite hard to change. Like there's some low-hanging fruit, but once you get through that, it's quite a tricky area where the actions aren't super clear and there's so many different things that could drive it, and actually untangling the data to work out what is driving churn is really challenging. So I think it's hard to measure, a bit scary, and a lagging indicator, but ultimately it compounds and it's one of the key parts of lifetime value. Average revenue over churn is lifetime value. So churn/retention is a huge part of a major a major metric. So I think it's been a challenge at previous businesses, but luckily at Fyxer, it was always a key part of like the targets, and we know it drives like a really good product experience to work on how good the product is and the retention. So it's not something I've needed to fight for, which is nice.
That must be so refreshing. But I think you raise a really interesting point. It's like often we just want to bury our heads in the sand. Let's get lots of new customers in, and then we don't have to deal with the fact that maybe we don't have quite product market fit yet. Jon, have you seen something similar?
Yes, absolutely. So for us, one of the things we've learned recently is the unit economics currently at Suitome are pretty tight, but the numbers seem to make sense. But then when we started digging into the different user types, so we have 3 products. One is, £0 per month, but you get more fees. One is £5 per month, and one is £10 per month. And what we worked out is that 70% odd people on the £0 per month. It's not free, it's £0 per month as a subscription. And we worked out that we actually lose money on those when compared to our acquisition cost. But at the highest tier, the users, we make hundreds of pounds in LTV, so very valuable users. So, we've learned that we've been, sort of targeting the wrong people, so to speak. There's 2 ways around that. Can we target the correct people to get them in from the beginning? Or can we automate things that bring upgrades from the lower tier to the upper tier? And we've done a great integration. At the beginning of the year, we brought Custom.io in as our CRM tool, and it can do pretty much anything you want if you know how to use it. And we did this really cool integration where I asked the data team, I want to get these guys to upgrade, but I need a real personalized message for, to make it worthwhile for them, rather than saying, hey, you might be able to save some money. We worked out a data point where it's quite complicated. There's 4 different factors that go into whether that if you upgrade to the higher tier, you will save a certain amount in fees per month if you have, X amount of transactions, X amount of cash withdrawals and all of that. Anyway, the data team went and worked that all out and created a single data point for me and said, this person will save money, and then how much. So we put that into the CRM. And so I could send a hyper personalized message to Nicola and say, hey, Nicola, you're on the Essential account based on your transactions from last month. If you were on Premium Plus, you would have saved £5.21. And that's been one of the most successful campaigns we've done. It's increased retention, it's increased the LTVs of the user, and it costs nothing because it's actually the best place it's worked is in a pop-up, and that's where we send it now.
But it's really interesting what you're saying as well about how not all of your customers were good customers. So sometimes churn can be positive, and it can also help you really determine the best acquisition strategy. So you're focusing on the right customers. And it's interesting, I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat saying, yeah, I don't want to be, but the business is super focused on new customers. So some shared pain here. So Rosie, if you're starting to build out a retention strategy, what are the key principles and first steps that you should really focus on? Because there's so many different things you could do. Where did you start at Fyxer? I'm not sure what they already had in place.
If anyone knows me, I like drawing and I like diagrams. And I get very overwhelmed if I can't understand the whole journey. So the most important thing that I always do, like whenever I was a freelancer or whenever I start a new business, is just go in and just say, like, from a fresh device, what is the core user experience from the first point to the last point? So what's the onboarding? How do you get set up? How would you cancel? What are the comms you get after that? And so just mapping out every single touch point. The second thing is then going into the churn survey. A lot of the time, if someone cancels, you'll have why are you canceling, and trying to get into that. A lot of the time people don't tell you why. So trying to send some comms and be like, hey, I'd love to chat to you. So when I got in, I think it was my first week, I chatted with one of our customer support people and got onto the round robin of like churn calls. And so I had like 5 a week for my first like 4 weeks of people talking to people who are unhappy and who are churning. And so the 2 things you get out of that is, one, the reasons for churn, and there's voluntary and involuntary. Voluntary is like, I don't want this anymore, I'm going to leave. And involuntary is I want this, but I've accidentally lost access or stopped paying for some reason. The voluntary churn is the harder one. The involuntary churn, you just need to solve that. So, your payment recovery stuff, we have someone who's amazing who works on that. all your error messaging, your error states, transactional emails when someone has hit an issue with your product and they haven't got to the value. You need to save those people as quickly as possible. And normally that's a bit easier because they didn't mean to churn, involuntary churn. And then voluntary churn, I split it into like your controllables and not controllables. There's the things that you can control. A lot of the time it will be like, oh, you didn't have this thing, where you're like, we do actually have that thing, but we obviously have an issue there with an earlier journey not getting to value. Or they might say you don't have this thing and we actually don't have that thing. And so then once you understand the voluntary reasons for churn and work out what you can control, you can start then giving people the thing that they need to change their mind and get them to come back. So sometimes it's like giving them an offer that they like. Sometimes it's saying, we're working on this. We now have a change log with all the new feature updates. So if someone's like, hey, you don't have this feature, we're like, we've just launched it, come back. So I think it's about showing like you're listening and showing that you understand. And with the mapping exercise, what you'll find is there are just moments that you've missed. You might just not have an email at one place, or you just might not have a trigger or some surface area where you can try and get them back. Because a lot of the time, if you don't ask, you don't get. And as Jon mentioned in some of our earlier conversations, like you can ask people quite a few times to come back. And so if you're starting a retention strategy, the two things you need to know are what are our triggers in the journey and what is the drivers for churn. And then you can start to put the triggers in place, answer the reasons for chat. And then I think that's a good starting point.
And Rosie, did you do a lot of customer research yourself to understand the churn issue?
We have a lot of people talking to customers all the time, every week, like all the engineers do it, like all the customer support, most of the marketers. So everyone's doing it. But instead of reading someone else's research to build empathy, I think you do need to do it yourself, not to necessarily provide extra research for the team, because the team is so overflowing with good customer insights, more for me to understand and get closer to the customer. So yes, I did it myself. And in your like company, if people aren't doing that, then what I find in previous places is every time you run an interview or get an insight, just post it. Hey, touch this user, this was their drivers, really interesting, couple of ideas, like a very lightweight, not like a report, very lightweight Slack message or email. I just chatted to this really interesting person. Here's their demographic. Here was their LTV. This is why they churned. Like, idea, let's do this, and then just action it. And so I think in any business, just like that constant sprinkling of like customer insight is really useful for people who maybe don't have time to speak to customers or haven't done it in a while.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable. And also hearing the language they use, because I think we often get caught up in our internal way of speaking, and hearing how the customer describes something can be super helpful as well. Were there any surprises, like, oh, here's an opportunity that we've missed and actually this is working really well, or anything you tested that didn't actually warrant the energy put into it?
I would say, in terms of surprising things, you can have a list of things that you feel either have worked in other businesses or you've seen online that are like, low hanging fruit. And the thing that surprised me is how different every business is with these things. One thing can work for this audience, but doesn't work for that audience. Send it from this person versus that person. I think one thing that was interesting is how important the sender is. So we have done lots of different tests, and as an AI business, like all AI businesses just need to work out like, how do you make sure you are trustworthy and there's a human behind the brand. So we had a hypothesis that if we send some of the reactivation and churn stuff from real people, then you will reactivate. And we have a real person called Alexa. She's a real person, but because her name is Alexa and there's Amazon Alexa, we were originally sending stuff from her, but there was an inkling that maybe people thought she was AI, because we would get some feedback being like, I don't want to talk to a bot, but it was actually a real person. So then we just tested a few different of our people. So we tested head of customer success, and we also tested the founder, Archie, and Archie won out on our testing of like reactivations and who's the best person to send it from. And the hypothesis was they need to look human, they need to look like they care, understand your pain. And so yeah, that was an interesting one, and it was like pitting the team against each other. So when I shared that A/B test, it was quite entertaining.
That's brilliant. I can imagine Archie was delighted. Yeah, any emails I get where it says no reply, I'm immediately annoyed. It's like, you're basically telling me you're not interested in me. Jon, did you also end up taking Suits Me from 0 to 100? Because it sounds like it, implementing Customer IO and the amount of emails you've been sending.
It wasn't exactly 0 to 100. There was a MailChimp set up before. Now, no shade to MailChimp, but it was set up like the old school MailChimp where you just send newsletters, right? There was a part of the business that didn't understand that most of the stuff you send you can just automate, which was quite an eye-opening experience for them, which is quite basic for us. But it's amazing that still exists in businesses. So essentially what we did is shut down MailChimp, transfer everything across, and then sort of ramp customer IO from 0 to 4 million or so messages per month. I think that's gone slightly off the peak now. So it's 3.8 million or something like that. And a lot of people will say, wow, that's a lot. What's your unsubscribe rate like? What's your spam rate and all that? And it's fine. People are happy with what we're sending. But to put in context, if any of you on Monzo, a lot of what you get is, you've just spent, £2.50 at Pret. We executed that method transactional system. At Suits Me, it was a hell of a task. And when you ask about surprise, Nicola, one of the things that surprised me the most is we always talk about delighting the customer, and it sounds really fluffy and it's quite hard to do, really, especially from an automated point of view. And the correlation between churn rate literally halving, the lowest it's ever been in the business, and those messages getting sent out is like, is very tight. We've also asked some of the customers in the call center, what do they think of these transactional messages? So those simple transactional messages, plus 2 other big changes that we made to fees and stuff, have actually reduced churn. So it is very important to find, ways to delight your customer. And I think it also, the feeling I get is that it builds a relationship with the business. So we're always telling them what they've spent, and then if something's wrong, they can call us and talk to the call center and all that. We also tell them when their balance is getting below £10. So be careful when you spend, so you don't incur an overdraft fee. We don't have an overdraft fee, but you get charged a fee if you go over 0. And that shows we care, and that shows we're looking after their finances, and that kind of stuff has really helped the relationship.
So Jon, because you always think, oh my God, are we sending too many comms out? You've massively increased the comms, but actually it's halved the churn, because the messaging, even though there's a lot of it, is super relevant for the customer. Exactly. And it's what they want to see. I also think what Rosie said about mapping out that customer journey is so important, even if you think you've already got it. I remember we revisited this at My Tutor, and we found all these additional routes that customers were going down with dead ends that we just hadn't picked up on before, that were all real opportunities to improve the experience and also do win-back campaigns as well. Some customers were just getting lost and just disappearing into the ether.
I have a cautionary tale of that quickly.
Oh, yeah.
I do also like to map out the entire journey, start to finish. I use Miro usually just to draw the maps. I built a new user journey, not consulting the map, and it didn't join up properly to the map. And I made an absolutely huge mistake, and new users were getting completely irrelevant emails. It was very embarrassing. I think I went until 4 a.m. to fix it. No one in the company had noticed. I eventually said, you know what, I'm actually going to tell everyone, because let's be straightforward about this. It's a good learning lesson here. Make sure, like, mapping is really, really important, especially as the journey gets really complicated. It's very important that you know where everybody is in the journey. So
you can get your arrows in the right place.
Yeah, correct arrows.
So I was having a conversation this morning with Mehul, who's actually on the webinar today, and we were talking about how to improve conversion rate from free trial to subscription, and the importance of really strong onboarding, and how we talk about it as onboarding, and actually really it's time to value. Jon, when thinking about Suits Me, how would you get the customer to value as quickly as possible, and how have you really improved and iterated on that?
Yeah, so again, it was pretty easy to make changes because the system wasn't nearly as efficient as it should be. I always say that users are impatient and spoiled. And if you think of it from that way, you want to serve them really efficiently, right? So one of the major issues I spotted in the onboarding flow right away is quite a natural thing, is once you've had your application approved, it's a bank, so you got to get sent a debit card. And that can take, if you're lucky, it'll take 2 days. Sometimes it takes 3 days, sometimes it takes 5 days, even when you send first class, apparently. So we had this huge dead spot between when they were so excited that they got approved to when the card arrives in the mail and they had no idea what's going on here. So a couple of things I did was start what I called a warmer campaign. It's like, all right, let's not just stop talking to them while they're waiting for the card. We sent 1 email a day with one very big advantage of using the card, like cashback, and then the next day's discounts, and so on and so on. The other interesting thing we did is we then completely simplified the way you activate your card. It was really complicated before, and it doesn't need to be. And the activation letter that came with the card was really wordy and complicated, and try to do everything all at once. And I just focused the letter in on, this is how you activate, because the data says when they activate, 90% of them get to what we would call I used to work in gaming, the hook stage, which is their first transaction. So increasing the activation rate is a proxy for getting to the hook, or what do you say, time to value. And then the next fun thing we did, which is more of a product thing, but it's driven by marketing, because I was like, the real issue here is they sign up, they're very excited, but then we disappear for a few days. Let's give them instant app access. I know this will sound obvious to most of us, but they couldn't access the app until they got the card, because the card was proof of address, and we figured out a way to separate those two things. So we would give them instant app access, and then we'd put £10 in their account, and we'd say, spend something. And generally when somebody spends something, they're hooked. And that was the best £10 we ever spent.
So you're bribing them to spend something to get them hooked by giving them £10.
80% of marketing is bribery.
But I think you say something really important when you're looking at that customer journey. It's not just looking at the pathway, but also how can you simplify each step, and where does it feel unnatural? Just a quick question on that. How did you get product on board? Because I think so often with retention, when you see some areas for improvement, it's really hard to get it on the product roadmap. How did you get the product team to adjust to accommodate that? Because it sounds like it wasn't a mini project.
No, it was big, yeah. Talking about marketing metrics is the great marketing disease, right? If you want to get buy-in from the business, it's going to almost always, it depends on how your business is structured. For the kind of businesses I work in, the buy-in's got to come from the CEO. So I talk LTV, I talk margin, I talk top line revenue, I talk bottom line revenue. I made some calculated assumptions about how much more quicker the users would get to, the first transaction, which is our big metric. And from that, I extrapolated how much, cash value that has to the business. And then it's very easy to walk into the management meeting and speak to the CTO and to the CEO and to the data team and the product team and say, this is what we need. It's whether they agree with my execution or not is a whole different story. But I think marketers need to understand product more. They need to understand the tech and the architecture more, and they need to speak in, proper financial language when you want to get big things done. And that's something I've been working on very hard the last few years.
Right. So really partnering with your finance team to get those business cases through.
Yeah.
Rosie, you have a 7-day free trial at Fyxer, I think.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make sure that they're getting the value in that free trial to get them to convert, so you really optimize on that time to value and the revenue?
There's so many different, onboarding is so complex because there's a lot of things that you need people to do, but there's a lot of things that you also need to do for them. So I always try and see onboarding as like a two-way conversation, where a lot of the time in onboarding is like, it's kind of like when you go to the dentist and they give you a form to fill out. Like, it's kind of like, does your early journey feel like going to a dentist? Name, NHS number, whatever. Do you, are you this, are you that? Or does it feel like you're having a nice chat at a coffee shop with someone? So I think a lot of the time your early experience needs to obviously get people set up, but make people feel that they are going through it seamlessly, but also investing enough that they're going to get value from it. I think when I've not at Fyxer, but in previous places, we did magic moment aha analysis, and you don't necessarily need someone who's like super technical. All you need is to work out like cohort of people who've done action A, cohort of people who've done action B, cohort of people who've done action C, and then the average user base. And for each of those cohorts, how many of them retain, how many of them pay? And that's a very simple analysis for saying, if someone does X, do they pay at a higher rate or do they convert at a higher rate? And even if you don't have that data, you can obviously, or kind of much simply just take a guess. A lot of the time when I've done these analysis, that magic moment analysis, like the result is not revolutionary. It's a lot of the time like, yeah, of course you need to take action A in order to get value, and then you'll convert like it's normally a big multiple X more than the average user who hasn't taken that action. And so a lot of the time I think you can do the analysis, or you can just take a guess, brainstorm what's the top 3 to 5 actions. What do we think is most important? Where do we think people get value? And just direct to that. Because I think the goal of these kind of analyses of activation, where should we drive people? What should we get people to do? Is more just to focus the team and get stuff done versus the existential question of what is onboarding? What should we get people to do in their first week? The analyses are to keep things simple. That's why Facebook had their 10 friends in 7 days or 7 friends in 10 days, one of the two. It's not necessarily that that's a silver bullet. It was just where their curve for like retention and activation leveled off. And after that, you get diminishing returns of getting people to have 20 friends, 30 friends, 40 friends. So for any business, it's kind of like, what's the first thing we should drive to that's not too deep in the funnel that it takes ages to get? It's not too high in the funnel that it's low impact, but the thing that we can focus a product team or a sprint around where it's a clear metric, get people to this point. Once you've kind of got that operationally, like the one thing, then the existential question is, if you drive more people there, do they actually convert better? Correlation versus causation. So the first step is to work out what that action is. What do you think is going to happen? Will you improve activation? The second step is to A/B test, getting more people to the action and not getting more people to the action. And if you see a statistically significant result there, you know that that's a causation. So getting people to that moment causes better results down the line versus what we were seeing in the data was just people were super keynos and they were getting to that and therefore converting or retaining. So there's 2 steps to like the activation and onboarding, but the most important thing is to get enough reps out with the team. So if you're testing on onboarding or activation, you need to be running like 4 to 8 tests to really have a winner with a win rate of like one in 4 or 1 in 5 experiments winning. So for me, it's less about what you do. It's more about, have you got the resources to bash out enough like onboarding and activation tests so that you can actually get a winner?
Yeah, ours at My Tutor was time to message a tutor, which was really, really key. What's the big leading indicator at Fyxer? What do they need to have done first?
The whole premise is that you don't need to set up a whole new product. You basically just need to connect your inbox so that we can get in, learn your tone of voice and start drafting emails for you. And so it's connecting your calendar. They're connecting your email, sorry. And there's also note taker. So you need to connect your calendar. So you need to get in and you need to connect your inbox and you need to be sending drafts.
Love that. So Mail's just had a very relevant question that we're talking about. Is it better to give premium access during free trial and lock the feature after the free trial is over if they haven't upgraded, or vice versa? Any thoughts on this?
I think I think it's a good idea in a lot of businesses, but you know, you might ask me, you know, in the previous example where 70% of our £0 per month customer base is not profitable to us, why do we keep them? Is because we feel it's a way in the door, and then we work on upgrading them to higher packages and keeping them for longer. So I can see in a lot of businesses Mehul's example working, but in our example, we find it's better to get people in the door, trying it out, even if we're losing money, and then upgrade as many as possible.
Thank you. Now, often when you start talking about retention, segmentation comes up. Oh, we need to segment. How are we going to do this? How many segments should we have? Rosie, when do you think you should start segmenting your base, and what's the best way to do this?
I think segmentation, there's going to be a hot take, but segmentation really overcomplicates things and increases the amount of things you need to test in QA when there's bugs in links. Like there's a lot of stuff that comes with like duplicating how many things you have live and out in the wild. The thing that I think is worth working on first is the triggers. So in terms of activation, in terms of churn and retention, like, do you have something when they churn? Do you have something on day 1, day 3, day 5, day 7, and then it kind of spaces out from there? Like, do you have the basic triggers that you should have? And so once you have those and you haven't kind of missed anything out, then it's a case of, okay, for this one email, do we think that country or problem or sender, or like, what is the thing that we think, the breakdown that we think is worth the effort? Because I've tested in the past quite a few different things, and there's a trade-off between like how much resource is it to execute this and how much good data do we have. Like a lot of the time when you're segmenting, if you've only got that data for 20% of the customer base, it's probably not the most strong indicator. I think across all my clients in the past when I was freelance. I think the one generalized learning I had was the problem was the most important segmentation. So like, what are you there for? What do you want? Like the core needs versus something like country, gender, a lot of the common demographic or geographical segmentation. So I've generally found that like the type of person you are, like what drives you, or whether you're a power user or a not, that I've generally found to be stronger. But there's so many things you could segment off, and I don't feel like I've exhausted the list, for example.
I loved seeing a few people smile when you said that. So I think it was a very valuable hot take. And the number of times I've gone into businesses and they've got the most complex segmentation and they can't even tell you why. It's literally they've just done it for the sake of it. And then when you start to bundle it all back up, no difference. So I think it's a really important point. Like, why are you segmenting and have you tested that it actually drives value? And there are definitely scenarios where it does. Sorry, Rosie.
On Customer IO, because we use Customer IO, you can do a holdout test. So like, for example, the reason for churning, you can have like 8 different reasons for churning. You can send people down that, and you can put a thing above it, which is a randomized cohort 50-50, or you can do it like 90-10, send 90% of people down a personalized churn route, and then you send like 10% people down something basic. And you need to be showing that your personalization, your segmentation, whatever it is actually driving, else just take out that complexity.
Yeah. Paul, we're getting some nice analogies here. We've had the dentist, now we're going to carpentry. He says segmenting is like using sandpaper before you've chopped the wood. So we're lining them up here. Jon, how about you? How have you handled segmentation in your space?
Yeah, I do agree with Rosie, and I've been in the position where I've encouraged the rest of the business to stop worrying about segmentation and let's worry about the end of getting people to the end of the flow. And I think that's right in a lot of situations. Suits Me has been around a long time. We've got a lot of data, and very recently the data architecture has become really, really good. If you think we need to know treasury data, which is where we keep the money, how much money is coming in and out, transactional data, and then user behavior data, and then your usual demographics. So we've got this whole umbrella of data that we can work from. I can see Chris from Customer getting really excited by that. And most of it is now feeding into the API, Chris. I think why people get sandpaper-ish about segmentation is a lot of people do it based on demographics and stuff that is not relevant, because then, once you have to communicate with someone in a CRM, if it's only demographics, how do you actually target that user, right? So I use behavioral-based segmentation. We've done a really good job at Suits Me with this. And it is very much worthwhile because, some of our segments are daily account users. The other one is secondary account users. The other one we call potters, which is kind of like savers. And these people are very different. So a daily account user is someone who gets their salary or their benefits paid directly into the account, and the way they use the card is significantly different to the way someone uses their secondary card. So the secondary card is, I always joke, is all the stuff you don't want your wife to see. So these guys are gambling and buying Deliveroo and stuff like that, whereas on the day-to-day card, it's it's Asda and Sainsbury's and clothes and stuff like that. So in that example, we're not going to send, back to school messages to the people using the secondary card, for example. And for the potters, we know exactly what they're potting for, so we can get a hyper personalized on that. When I say potters, there's this, we learned through the research that there's this theory in financial management that you should, personal finance management, that you should open up pots or different accounts where you save for your holiday. So it's not about the interest rate of the savings, it's about putting money away into the pot. So we have a lot of holiday pots. And so we've started partnering with, Love Holidays and companies like that to, send them interesting offers and stuff like that, or interesting information about what's the latest trends in like budget holidays and stuff like that. So that only goes to the potters. It doesn't go to the secondary account and stuff like that. So because our user base is so unique, so broad, segmentation works for us. And we've obviously tested it, and we've tested it with holdouts, which is the best way to test in CRM. And we've seen a lot of uplift there.
I love that, potters.
Yeah.
That is great. But also you've got the really relevant data.
Yeah.
So you know what your customers are looking for.
Exactly.
Jon, you mentioned earlier at the beginning of the webinar a campaign that had been super successful, which was uber personalized. I'd love to just hear a little bit more about campaigns that have really worked for you to encourage retention and usage. And I love a horror story. Any that maybe haven't worked?
I've already told you the horror story. It was the one where I didn't focus and I messed up the flow. And
Is that the only one?
I must have another one. I'll have a think about it. I'll definitely have one.
And in terms of successful ones?
In terms of successful campaigns or just flows?
Yeah. Successful campaigns or flows that you've brought in. What's really worked to drive retention?
The best one that's driven retention is the upgrade one that I've already mentioned. So, if you're on the Premium Plus, you would save, £5.21 per month. That one worked really well. The other one is what we call instant cashback. So we've increased our cashback partners. Now you got to remember, we know everything about a user because we can see their transactional data. So it does make hyper personalization really interesting, very complicated, but interesting. So one of the campaigns that has worked great is we see someone spending at Tesco, but they're not our cashback partner. So we send them a little push and say, hey, if you spend the same amount at Tesco, you'd save, £1.25 at Asda or Sano's, which is one of our cashback partners. So that whole cashback loop has worked really well. There's a direct correlation between how much people use cashback and how long they stay with the business. So that's one of my favorite campaigns. It's not flashy, like, really great creativity, really fun messaging and stuff like that. It's just getting the data to work for the customer and hyper personalize everything.
Shows value, and that's the most important thing. I think we can get too caught up in the creative flashiness. Rosie, any that you found worked really well either at Fyxer or previous businesses?
I think similar to Jon's point on his campaign, where you show the value, you show like monetary or kind of usage-based personal thing. I think those are interesting. We have a week in review, which is how much time you save. So you, for example, will get an email which saying you saved 5 hours this week. You had this many drafts sent, like we did this amount of work for you. I think especially with AI products, like showing that you're doing work and that the person's getting value. Because a lot of products, if you actually work really well, you're kind of in the background. So showing the value, I think is really important. In terms of, I had a couple of things in previous clients where we would have like a large cohort of people who had joined from an offer a year ago. And then that those people are coming to the end. And so it's always like a scramble to the end of that. Everyone's like, they're all going to cancel. And like a lot of things like sharing offers or sharing improvements, I've generally found that discounts can either work or not work depending on why someone is leaving. Like if they're leaving because of price, then offers work. If they're leaving because you haven't got a feature, price doesn't always work. And so I think there's nothing that's a silver bullet. It's more like, who's the customer segment that you're talking to? What do they care about? If it's price, then it's discount. If it's not sure if I'm getting value from it, show the value. If it's you don't have this feature, like we're building it in the next 2 weeks, or we've just launched it, or it's on the roadmap, we hear you, not now. So I think it really depends. There's no like silver bullet that's always worked in every single area. It's more like understanding the customer and why they churn. And I would also say that
keep going, sorry.
Rebecca, I think it was, Rebecca in the chat was asking about like more B2B or enterprisey type customers where your annual recurring revenue is much, much higher. And because Fyxer's B2B and B2C2B, so it's like we have land and expand, you've got product-led growth, as well as we have a sales team. So we have both of those audiences. We've got the bigger fish and the smaller fish. And the stuff I work on and talk about is more like product-led growth and kind of the land and expand type thing. Then we exclude the enterprise from them. And the enterprise customers are like on an individual case-by-case basis. They are like nurtured by the team, and we've got people that do that. So it is very much the targets and the things that you would do for different sizes of the customers are very different. Like, for example, if a customer of above a 10 seat is looking to churn, we want to talk to them. But for example, I sent my own personal Calendly link out to a load of people who we thought were going to churn because they hadn't done a certain action in a certain amount of time, or they had like reduced an action. And I was like, hey, just would love to understand like how's things going recently. We've made XYZ improvements. Are you seeing them? Question mark. Book a call if you want to talk about it more. And I had like 400 people reply to me, and I had like 10 calls booked, and I was like, oh my God, I'm drowning in admin now. So yeah, I think, yeah, only give your Calendly link if they're a high lifetime value, else you're drowning in emails.
Everyone wants to talk to you, Rosie. I do love that value one though. This is how much time you save, because that also makes me feel as a customer like I am the smartest person in the world, and I'm likely to go and tell people about it. Like, oh, I've just used this great tool. And I've seen this happen actually with Fyxer. I was at a conference the other day and someone was like, oh yeah, well, I've saved loads of time because I use Fyxer. And then it's a talking point, and you're making it easy for them to have that as a talking point. So I love that. Now, I think when we talk about retention, we so often think about email. But obviously, there are lots of other channels you can use as well. John, what are you using outside of just email? I mean, you've mentioned some app notifications as well. Anything else?
Yeah, so I try to use them in combination because every channel has its pros and cons, right? So email is still king. I remember, I'm sure most of you remember, I think around about 10 years ago, everyone proclaiming the death of email, which was pretty funny. But we also use SMS. We use app notifications, we even use direct mail. So, for example, if the FCA requires us to freeze accounts sometimes. So if your account has been frozen, that's super urgent. So we send them an email, an SMS, and a push. So just the first one they see is very important. So the reason, and SMS works great. Everyone sees an SMS. Whether they open it up is a different story, because sometimes they can come across a little spammy. But we've set it up properly with Twilio, where it says suits me as a name rather than just a number, and those little things make a big difference. Some people will see the notification first, but then also we, as all marketers know, because of stuff like ATT and all of that, your deliverability on notifications is not always great, but they are fast and they are free essentially. So there are less urgent campaigns where like the £10 until you've got £10 left in your balance. That is less urgent. So what we do is send a push first. If the push does not deliver, that probably means that they've got notifications turned off. We then send an email. If the email isn't opened after an hour, we then send them an SMS. And what that does, and we only send the SMS if the other two don't deliver. What that does is we'll make sure we get the message to them. But essentially, we've only sent them one message, because it will stop once the message is received. And if we have to send, probably the most effective in terms of urgency, but the most expensive, which is SMS, that's right at the end. So effective messaging, but also saving costs at the same time.
That's a great one. And outside of those channels, have you ever done anything with direct mail, with WhatsApp?
Love direct mail. WhatsApp, we're looking at it. I might be wrong. I'd love to speak to some people about it. It's more complicated than it seems. I think they're trying to make sure that no shitty spammy businesses get onto WhatsApp. So there's quite a few hoops that you have to jump through. And is the cost saving versus SMS actually there? I'm not convinced, but I might have that wrong. But in terms of I imagine that in terms of deliverability and visibility, I think it's excellent. Whenever I get messaged by a business on WhatsApp, I see it and I interact with it, even if it's reluctantly. So I think WhatsApp is a very interesting option for the future. There's also RCP, which I'm looking at. I don't know too much about, but I know Custom IO is going big on that, which is essentially just fancy SMS. One of my favorite direct mail stories is at Funding Circle. For a very, and this is, when was that Funding Circle? Like 15 years ago. This is when Google paid ads were super efficient, really cheap, and really it was like a go-to without even thinking about it. But we ran a campaign. It ended up lasting 2 years, where we just send a written letter by the CEO to businesses in the snail mail. But now the trick is we had all of the UK companies' data, and our analytics team created a sort of probability model. They're like, oh, these guys have all of the right criteria to take out a loan with us. So we didn't send to every business in the UK. We just sent to very specific businesses that we thought might have a propensity towards a loan. And that, for, I'm trying to remember now, maybe 2 years, was more efficient in terms of CPA for a business than Google Ads was. And so I'm very proud of that campaign. It was super fun.
I love direct mail. And I've seen actually quite a few articles recently about the return of the catalogue. And when I was at Snapfish, we found catalogues actually did really well. Just having something through the door around Christmas, ROI was incredible versus email. So I mean, it does depend on your customer base, of course. Rosie, what about you? Are you using anything else aside from email?
Email at the moment. I in the past have used SMS and a few other things, but for us, our product works on email and in calls. So trying to get people back in the moments where kind of the actions happen, it's like the most immediate. Like in terms of people in the world, there's like over 4 billion people using email, and it's like 28% of a workday is on email. So for us, being a product that a lot of people use for work, like being where they are does mean email. That's not to say that other channels aren't important. Like we have an incredible brand team where organic LinkedIn, doing a lot of like founder content. Our founder just spoke at Web Summit, I think last week. So there's lots of like halo brand activity happening that helps keep top of mind. Ads help and things like that. But in terms of like immediate retention strategy, I feel like there's so much more to do on email, and it's like where our product lives. So trying to nip churn in the bud earlier in the process of earlier in someone's customer journey versus sending them mail or WhatsApp is probably my focus, I would say.
Yeah. And I think
more of a product perspective than a marketing perspective.
But I think you just raised a really important point that actually that halo brand effect, it does impact your retention as well as your acquisition. And we often forget about that. So I'm going to move into our quickfire round. I just have 3 questions and this is quickfire. So starting with you, Jon, what is your favorite retention campaign of all time? And everyone listening, please do feel free to add yours in chat as well if you have a favorite.
Think about this last night, and I remembered many years ago, there's a physical store in Bristol where you can go buy music producer equipment, and I used to try and make music with drum machines and stuff like that. And based on conversations I'd had with them, they knew what my next challenge was going to be. So I bought a drum machine, and there was a specific thing I was struggling with it, and then suddenly I got an email. Oh, if you have this setup and you have these parameters, you probably need this adapter. And I just thought that was magic. So it was delight again, and it was almost felt like it was predicting what I was going to do next. So this is a physical store that has really thought hard about. It's kind of easy because they're enthusiasts and you know exactly what they're going to do next. But I just thought that was a really delightful experience, and it definitely sent me back to the store, to go get some more stuff. Yeah,
felt so personalized.
Yeah, it was super great. Yeah.
Rosie, what's yours?
If it's like the most common retention mistake, I don't know if I would call it retention mistake, but my pet peeve is the "we'll miss you." I hate it so much, because I actually did like a UX analysis on the cancellation flows and how you feel. Like this was a year ago, how you feel at the end of the cancellation flow, and I analyzed Loom's cancellation flow, and there was no "we'll miss you." A lot of them have I think it's like there's a phrase called confirm shaming, which is like you shame people for their actions in a UX flow. You're making them feel shame for taking the next action, and that, oh, we'll miss you, oh, it's been so long, like it's like a toxic breakup. And I'm like, when has a toxic breakup ever got people back together in a healthy way? And when I did this analysis on Loom's flow, it was very much like, thank you so much, like this is all the time you saved, like come back anytime. And I did that analysis and I posted it on LinkedIn, and actually the designer who designed the flow replied and said that it improved retention. The fact that they called the project graceful goodbyes, and the hypothesis was if we let people go gracefully versus like shaming them, they'll come back. And when they measured retention, not on like a 30-day or 60-day period, but like a 6-month period, they like a smiley face where like the lasting brand impact of having a graceful goodbye instead of confirm shaming improved retention for them. So I hate a "we'll miss you," and I instantly delete any sort of "we'll miss you" comms.
Oh, Rosie, please share the LinkedIn post and I'll send it to everyone afterwards, or I'll see if I can dig it out. James is saying his is Spotify Wrapped. Mayhall is the use it or lose it in relation to ISA allowance. And Chris, EasyJet scratch map via email. I didn't ever get one of those. Anyway, question number 2. Finish the sentence. Great retention starts with.
Understanding your customer needs and understanding your data environment so that you can deliver those needs.
Great. And Rosie?
Jon stole it.
Oh, sorry, Rosie.
No, I would say exactly the same. Great retention starts with understanding why they changed in the first place.
Yeah.
And graceful goodbyes as well, Rosie.
If I could quickly add to Rosie's graceful goodbyes, it's hilarious. We almost use the same analogy. One of my mantras is don't communicate like an EDX. So yeah, I think that's very important in the way you communicate. Let people go when they need to go.
So I'm just going to reverse them. Jon, the most common retention mistake you see?
I think people trying to be too clever in their emails, too fancy, too much design, too much this, too much that, too many messages. Just be straight to the point. Always there's that old adage, what's in it for me, the me being the customer. Don't just send for the sake of sending. Send because you have a reason to communicate with the customer, and preferably you're bringing them value or useful insights.
And Rosie, flipping it, what's your favorite retention campaign?
My favorite, because I love Strava, is the Strava Year in Sport. For like 4 years, they had it free. No, maybe not 4, but I think it was up to 2023 or 24. They had it free, and then they made it paid, and a load of people like reactivated and converted to paid based off it because they just loved it. So they locked down this campaign and then got more people to sign up. So yeah, I love it because I like sports, and it was like, damn, I cycled a lot this year, or I ran less this year, and it's just like really, really rewarding to see how much you've done.
Yeah, as long as it has gone up, not down.
I think they must have a threshold, because if it's like you've done 0 this year, I don't think they send it.
Oh, you could get a really good guilt email there. Do you know you've done absolutely nothing this year?
Yeah, I don't think that would work for Strava and their brand.
I don't either. There was a really interesting, I was at exhibition at the British Library all about maps, and they were saying they had a bit of a crisis with Strava because loads of army bods were using Strava in secret army bases in the Middle East, and suddenly they were all popping up on maps, and they were like, okay, this is not so secret anymore because it's all over Strava. So they've now had to restrict it in certain regions, but because everyone wants to track their running, they don't want to miss out on it being tracked. So before we close, any particular questions? James, I know you had one. Do you want to come off mute and share it? One for Jon?
I will. I'll read it out. Hi, Jon. So you said that email is still king, and I appreciate Rosie at Fyxer is kind of reimagining email. Any wild and crazy predictions to end us on maybe when email isn't king anymore?
Oh, crystal ball time.
Well, I've worked. You can probably hear from my accent. I've worked across many African countries. Email is not king in Africa. It just doesn't exist. So CRM is very interesting there. I don't know, man. Like, I think the function of an email will always exist. It'll evolve a lot. Companies like Rosie's company will change the way we interact with them, but there will always be some way that you need for your primary source of communication. And it's survived so many apparent deaths now that I don't know. It's like a cockroach. I don't think it's ever going to die.
Rosie, are you in agreement?
I think communication is here to stay. Like, the way in which we communicate is predominantly email and has been. If we can see a world where people are communicating differently, then yes. I like email because it's async. I hate calls. So I would like to
give that her Calendly.
I mean, Slack is arguably probably the biggest example of something trying to overtake email. And you can see it's adopted by a certain ICP, in ideal customer profile, and not others. Do I think Slack and instant messaging is going to take over from email in all industries? I don't know. My grand's on Instagram, so anything can happen.
My mum too. Chris, what about you? Crystal ball for Customer I/O. Anything that you think may be coming soon, or developments for next year?
Good question. We are leaning heavily into SMS and rich messaging on SMS as a new channel. Similarly, WhatsApp. I also think just bringing the whole ad tech world into one space with the MarTech world as well. So being able to orchestrate all your ad spend and ad buying all in one place, connecting to your channels. So yeah, I'm with Rosie. I think that and John, email is the cockroach that will never go away. I think that generationally people just store the information, the most important information, in their most important inbox, and everything else becomes just chatter. So yeah, I think email's here to stay.
Yeah, and I think we just all know that every 3 months there'll be more LinkedIn posts on email is dead, and it'll keep going, but none of us believe that. Well, thank you so much, Rosie and Jon. That was fabulous. Great insights, some great takeaways. Grateful goodbye is staying with me, and also the whole onboarding dentist analogy too. Really appreciate you giving up your time and being so open. And thank you everyone for joining us. Wishing you all a wonderful afternoon.